Good evening and welcome to, this is the 10th episode of the Maternity Midwifery Hour, and this night we're looking at supporting bereaved families because, as many of you will know, it's actually Baby Loss Awareness Month this month. My name's Sue Macdonald and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Festival and these hours that we're doing at the moment. And these hours were really developed to provide some CPD, continuing professional development, for midwives, for student midwives and other people in maternity services while they couldn't access face-to-face activities. And they're supported by Netflix. That's where you get your video streaming from maternity experts. You get your CPD and your revalidation. It's a really good resource if you haven't discovered it for midwives and student midwives. Just the place to go if you've got a project to work on. And tonight we'll be looking at the issue of perinatal loss and how best to support women and families and ourselves as well to ensure high quality, compassionate and caring maternity services. And I just have to reiterate that June 2020 is actually Stillbirth and Neonatal Death Awareness Month. It used to be Baby Loss Awareness Week, but it's gone to a month. And to mark this, Netflix is partnering with SANDS, who want to improve support to anyone who's affected by the death of a baby and improve bereavement care and services for parents. And so during June 2020, any Netflix box sets, and those of you who've been looking at the box sets will know what this means, any of them sold will have a donation provided to SANDS as you go. So you're doing two things. You're getting a very good product and you're giving some pennies to SANDS for their work. So I'm really pleased that I've got two key people to talk to you tonight. The first is Clare Worgan, who's from the SANDS Training and Learning Resources Manager at SANDS, and Marc, who's in the National Bereavement and Care Pathway Lead. And usually we start this evening with a little moment of the week from each of our speakers. So I'm going to invite Clare maybe to come up with her moment of the week, just to start things off.
Okay, so my moment of the week is swimming. I've really missed swimming since lockdown kicked in. So I haven't been, obviously the pools are closed, but at the weekend I donned my wetsuit and I went for a swim in the sea, which was lovely. Highlight of my week, definitely.
We're all going to be so much healthier after this.
Yeah, we are.
How about Marc?
On a similar theme, actually, yes. Early this morning, I went down to just down to Southsea, about half an hour from where we live, and caught up with a friend. Very, very early morning walk along the prom. Was struck by the number of swimmers, actually, Claire, that were in the sea. There were many in their wetsuits, which surprised me. It was quite a cloudy day, but very still. So I had a good chat with him, and then after he went off to work, I went and did an hour of running along the seafront, and felt very good afterwards. So yeah, that's probably been the highlight of the week so far, before what has been a exceptionally busy day and obviously going to be a busy evening too. Wow,
well thank you for that. We're all going to be healthier. You've got two fabulous role models here for people to think about maybe going for a swim or a good brisk walk or even a run. So thank you for those moments of the week. And the usual point now is, before we start the session, because everyone will know the COVID-19 has impacted on the national health, it's impacted on our whole life. And I wanted to record our usual maternity forum solidarity and thanks to all of the people who are caring for and supporting people who have had COVID-19. And our thoughts are with the people who've lost someone close to them, the friends or family, due to COVID. It's a very difficult time for many people. And also some solidarity with the people who are shielding and people who have to be on lockdown even more than everybody else. It's hard. And of course, a big thank you needs to go to our NHS colleagues and their families who are all supporting them, and the key workers. And that goes for all of the people who keep the country going at the moment, for them and their families for all they're doing. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things from the news. Now, last week I mentioned the July 2020 UK Vogue cover, with Rachel Miller on the cover. Get your copy now, if you can, or get a copy of a picture of it. Anyway, it's really good. It's got a day in the life of 3 key workers as well. That's quite revolutionary, really, for Vogue. This is the UK Vogue, not the American one. On a more difficult note, I think one of the biggest things in the news has been the issue of race, and the BAME is still rightly so, highly in the news, knowing that a lot of BAME people are affected adversely and more so by COVID-19. We really need to be aware of that, and we need to make sure we're looking at ways in which we can help colleagues who might be at greater risk. It can be protected more so. It's a time when we need to look at ourselves, and we need to look at I think that's what's come over to me the last few days, is thinking about our personal history, but also our big shared history. And some history, I know the UK history very well, European. I don't know some of the African and the Indian histories, and I'm conscious I need to know more about that. So it's a good learning for everyone, I think. A little happy birthday to Jenny the midwife while I'm here. And just another little date for your diary, which is July the 5th, which is the 72nd birthday of the NHS. And there's a real discussion going underway about having a celebration, whether it's going to be an applaud event, like our Thursday clapping outside events. And also what I think was really lovely was the idea of lighting a candle in the window to mark all of the people lost to COVID-19. I think that's a very lovely thing to be able to do, to just remember all of those people we've lost, and their families that we can support. So back to kind of the evening that we're going to spend together. We're going to be looking at the effect of COVID-19 in the context of loss and bereavement, and how we can best support bereaved women and their families, and what we need to be aware of from their experiences, the experiences of bereaved parents, including the knowledge and skills that we as midwives and student midwives need in caring for parents at this really difficult time. And so I'm really so delighted to welcome Clare Worgan, and she's Training and Learning Resources Manager at SANDS. And her background is in commercial project management. However, after her daughter was stillborn in 2016, she was inspired to become a midwife and started her midwifery degree the following year. As a student midwife, Clare discovered that there was limited guidance and support for midwives when it came to caring for bereaved parents, and this led to her role at SANDS. She's an advocate for high quality bereavement care, and at SANDS she's met many bereaved parents who are equally as passionate about supporting healthcare staff, and seen how important communication, time, informed choice and signposting are for the well-being of families. At SANDS, Clare and her dedicated team provide training and support for healthcare professionals so they feel confident and equipped to provide the best possible care for families when the worst happens. So the screen is now yours, Clare. Welcome, and thank you in advance for what you're going to talk about.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, so before we get going, I just wanted to introduce SANDS, because I'm aware that many people listening may have heard of SANDS and know what we stand for, but many people won't. So we're a UK charity, and our vision is for a world where fewer babies die, but if a baby does die, that anyone affected receives the best possible care and support for as long as it's needed. And we have a mission which is threefold. The first is to help save babies' lives. So we have a research team which support a lot of research around prevention, ensure that excellent bereavement care is available for all who need it, and providing bereavement support for as long as needed. So the second one is what we're doing today. So we work quite closely with healthcare professionals, providing support and education and resources to give you guys the tools to be able to support families. So what I'm going to do first is just share a quick video which I guess summarises the work of SANDS, and we call it Finding the Word. So it's a campaign that we're running this month throughout SANDS Awareness Month. Okay.
SANDS is here to support everyone working in hospitals to equip them with the confidence and skills to care for families when the worst happens. The death of a baby is life-changing, so it's vital that the NHS is supported to provide safe and sensitive care for bereaved families. Supporting bereaved families can be challenging for NHS staff who are often working under pressure and may feel unprepared and daunted by how to respond when a baby dies, not knowing what to say or do, and feeling worried about getting it wrong and managing their own emotions. SANDS is here to help. We have the expertise to support all healthcare professionals so that bereaved families are well cared for when a baby dies. We have a strong track record over many years of providing accredited training, resources, guidance, and a network of supportive colleagues across the NHS. Good care cannot remove a family's pain and grief, but it can have a long-lasting impact on their well-being, helping them continue in life without their much-loved baby. By sharing what SANDS has to offer, you will help us empower more NHS frontline workers. When NHS staff are well supported, families are well supported.
So, what is bereavement care? The best people to ask, and what you will hear from my next 10 minutes, is the voice of bereaved parents. So I've got a few clips that I'll share today because they are the experts. They understand what bereavement is and what bereavement care is. So this first clip is from a mum who's going to explain from her perspective what bereavement care is.
Bereavement care to us as parents was crucial in the way it was handled. Losing a child isn't the norm. It's not the way things should be. It's all your hopes and your future, and you're in a situation which is like a nightmare. Bereavement care and people around you helping or doing what they can to just guide you through the next steps, the next hours, minutes, whatever, is really, I can't stress enough how important that is. And the sensitivity and the care that people give you at that time is something that stays with you all the time, forever. It's not something you ever get over. It's not something you will ever forget, and it will change you. But people that are with you during those dark times, and especially initially when the worst thing in the world's just happened, is just, it can't be understated.
So, as she quite clearly said there, it's not about clinical care, it's about support. You can't fix a family's pain, but what you can do is help them process what's happened to them. So before I go on, I just wanted to mention the brain. So when a baby dies, it's a traumatic experience, which means the individual and the couple and the whole family are affected in various different ways. The death of a baby, if you're told your baby has died, if you're told your baby probably will die or is going to die, then the brain changes. And often we hear bereaved parents talk about a brain fog, and it's this where the brain goes into survival mode, which means that they can't process actually what's actually happening. So when we talk about brain fog, when we talk to healthcare professionals, we try and remember to be patient, be gentle, and give them time. Often when a baby dies, there are various conversations that need to be had, there's various decisions that need to be made. But because the parent's brain isn't always in the right place to take on this information, it's quite important to remember to be gentle. And when we do talk to bereaved parents, and when we say that we're going to speak to healthcare professionals, we ask them what they want us to share with you guys. And it comes down to 3 topics. It comes down to communication, empathy and compassion, and options and signposting. So I'm just going to give a quick overview on those 3. So when it comes to empathy and compassion, it's really important to see the experience from the bereaved parent's point of view. So every bereaved parent has their own very unique experience of pregnancy, birth, death, and loss. And these experiences relate back to their individual beliefs. So individual beliefs around death, it might be cultural, it could be religious, around birth. So birth and death are quite big times in anyone's life, and it's rarely that we actually see or hear both together. I'm not going to talk about the physical nature of birth and postnatal recovery. I don't think I need to with a midwifery audience. But it's important to remember, so it is an emotional, traumatic time, but obviously there's someone who's just given birth who's also physically recovering from an event. And because we rarely talk about birth and death together, we rarely talk about stillbirth or neonatal death, often parents feel a sense of isolation, and this can start in the very early days because they probably have never heard of anyone who's experienced a stillbirth or a neonatal death, and when it happens to them, it can feel like it's only you that it's ever happened to, and that can be quite overwhelming, especially in the early days when they're trying to process what's happened. When a baby dies, it's a traumatic event at the time, but it also has a lifelong impact. So this baby will always be part of that family and part of the whole family. So it will affect parents, grandparents, siblings. And this baby will always have birthdays. So there will always be a 1st birthday and a 5th birthday and a 25th birthday. And there'll always be someone missing from that family. So there is a trauma that you guys will be part of, but also it's a lifelong journey for this family. An impact on self-esteem and self-image. Often we hear bereaved parents talk about, I feel like a mum or I feel like a dad, but I haven't got a baby. And we call it empty arms. And some people will talk about having physically heavy arms where their baby should be, especially in the postnatal recovery days, because obviously it's the hormones and it's the love that they feel for their baby. So I did mention at the beginning about the uniqueness of experience, but one thing that we hear from all bereaved parents is a sense of pride in their baby. So the love that's in their voice when they talk about their baby and a sense of pride is universal, and I'm hoping that's what you'll get today when you listen to the parents. What we always hear from bereaved parents is they don't want anyone to feel sorry for them. If you ask a parent, what would you like healthcare professionals to do, they would say, we'd like them to understand, to see things from our perspective. So it's about compassion and empathy rather than sympathy. And obviously, you can't understand what it's like to lose a baby if your baby's never died. But you can empathise. So I've just got a video here, which hopefully will show the difference between sympathy and empathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So that quite nicely, I think, shows the difference between sympathy and empathy, and actually being with the parents. And that brings me on to empathetic communication. So often parents will say, you obviously are going through quite powerful emotions. And as they said in the video, the way to kind of display empathy is to recognize the emotion in someone else and communicate that back to them. And actually that's really key, especially when a baby dies, when the parent is trying to process what's happening. So usually in our workshops, we talk a lot about communication, we do scenarios, but I've just included one here just to kind of give an example. So a parent may say something like, I feel like my heart is going to break. And then we could have an empathetic response, or we could have a sympathetic response. So we have either got, oh no, that's awful, I feel sorry for you, or I'm so sorry to hear how devastating and heartbreaking it's been for you. So if you can see the difference, the bottom one is the empathetic response because it involves the emotion that the parent's feeling, and actually it makes the parent feel heard and validated and actually can make them feel comforted. Whereas this one is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, it's perfectly polite, but actually it's not going to help the parents, not going to make them feel like they are safe. That brings me on to communication. I've got some top tips. I'm not going to go through them all, but being gentle is really important. Take time to think about what you're going to say to parents. It might just take a few seconds for you to think through what you're going to say. Consider your language is a really important one. So if parents are using a baby's name, use the baby's name. Not all babies have names. Obviously, midwives know some babies are born without a name and you may get one later. But be led by the parents. English may not be the parent's first language, even though they may sound like they can speak really good English, and obviously you're communicating with them, but it doesn't mean that, especially in times of trauma and shock, that they can understand what's happening. It takes time to process, even if English is your first language. But also use the language that parents use. Gradually over time, parents will get a vocabulary around loss. So some will talk about stillbirth and death. Some will use phrases such as passed away or born sleeping or angel baby. And it's really important to use the parents' language, especially in the early days when parents are just finding their way. And what we always say is, I'm sorry. So I'm sorry your baby died. I'm sorry this is happening to you. And that's not saying, oh, I've done something wrong. That is just showing that you're human. It's not an expression of guilt. So it's a really nice thing to say. The other thing that parents always talk about, so on top of empathy, compassion, and communication, is giving options. So the variety of options for bereaved parents when a baby dies, I've listed some of them here, and I know Marc's going to talk about options more when he talks about the care pathways. So all I'm going to mention is this. So all parents, when they're pregnant, plan a birth plan. Not all, but many pregnant people plan a birth plan. So they either plan their birth, they might plan the going home outfit for the baby, what the nursery's going to look like, even what school the baby's going to go to. But no one plans how to make as many memories as possible in a short time as possible. So these families will have, it might be hours, it might be days, to cram as many memories into those that short time as possible. And these memories are what they'll cherish for a lifetime. So it's really important to for healthcare professionals to understand what the options are for families. And all of these things on here add up to an experience for families. What I will say is all of these things are on the Bereavement app and the SANDS support book. So do use, I'm not a fan of lists, but do get hold of a list, because when emotions are high, it can be really helpful to make sure parents have had all of the options that they need. We often hear parents afterwards, so weeks or months down the line, say, I wish I had been told that I could donate my milk. I hear that quite a lot now because it's becoming more and more common, but it wasn't. Or I wish I was told that I could take my baby home, but I didn't, so I wasn't told about it. So these parents need to be guided in what options are available. But it's really important that it's done in a gentle way. Because like I said at the beginning, the brain is processing trauma and it's processing loss and it's processing grief. So sometimes it might take a bit of repetition to go back to parents and offer the same thing again, because the first time they weren't so sure. It takes time to process. So I've got a quote here from a bereaved mum who I actually spoke to her today and asked her what she thought I should say. And she said, please take photographs for the families. I didn't really want to at the time, as I didn't understand why I would want to remember any of that nightmare, but I honestly do. I wish I had more pictures, the details of his hands and his feet and his little ears. I wish I had more. And this is often what we hear from bereaved parents. Obviously, you can't say this to a bereaved parent when they're holding their baby or when they've just been told their baby's died. But if you have this in the back of your mind, as long as you're gently supporting the parents, then hopefully we can make sure that these parents have cherished memories to take home. So I'm just going to cover a bit on grief because I talked about the brain fog at the beginning. Because everything is foggy, these parents will be feeling all of these powerful emotions at the beginning. So you will probably see fear, anger, panic, guilt, numbness, sometimes in waves, sometimes all together. And in the old days, they used to talk about stages of grief. But if you ask anyone whose baby's died, they will more rightly recognize with this image on the right-hand side, it's a big mixture of emotions that they're trying to process. And those emotions, that grief never goes away. What happens is the grief stays the same. So the grief inside the individual will stay the same. So I've got an example here. It's Tonkin's theory, growing around grief. So in the smaller jar, this is when the baby first dies or when the parents find out that the baby is going to die. The grief is overwhelming. So all of those powerful emotions that we saw, it's all encompassing. It's all they can think about. All they can think about is the loss of their baby or their baby. It is a bit like birth in general when the baby basically takes off over your whole life. That grief never goes away. Over time, so over weeks and months, but only with really good support, will that grief stay and life will grow around it. So these parents may go on to have other children. So you might see them pregnancy after loss. They'll go back to work after maternity leave or paternity leave. Hopefully they'll have some kind of professional support if they need it. And often you will find there are hundreds of charities set up in various babies' names. So a lot of bereaved parents will do some kind of charity work, even if it's running a marathon. And over time, the grief stays, and even 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years down the line, the grief is still there. So it's really important that it's gently dealt with from the very early days. And we at SANDS use the term finding their way. So it's parents finding their way with really good support from the people that are around them, which obviously includes midwives in the very early days. So I'm just going to show a video here of a dad who's going to talk about his experience and how he's finding his way.
To the staff that cared for Isaac, and to the whole family, because it wasn't just Isaac. The care given was primarily to him, but it was for everyone in our family. We will be eternally grateful. We got 6 days with our son when we may not have done. And we can't be more grateful to the staff for what they did for us to give us those 6 days with Isaac. They become our friends. They support us in what we still do now. And What more can you say? They're incredible. Thank you.
So finally, I just wanted to mention staff wellbeing, because every parent recognises, they may not recognise at the time when obviously they're going through a traumatic experience, that you guys, healthcare staff, are human too. So it's really important that you guys are supported. And it is possible for a midwife who's caring for a family to feel some of those powerful emotions we talked about in grief. You can feel the grief of the baby, and you can obviously feel empathy for the family. So if you need to, please talk to colleagues, friends, and the SANDS helpline is available, which we'll share at the end. And if you do need professional support, then do refer to specialist support, and please be kind to yourself as much as possible. So finally, I'm just going to finish with a final quote from a parent. So SANDS Insight on Twitter is our education policy and research page. So if you want to follow us and learn anything about education to do with stillbirth and neonatal death, please do. So last week we spoke to bereaved parents on there on the baby loss hour and asked them for their opinion. And this kind of sums up what they said. One mum said this. She said, "Please give families as much time, kindness, compassion, support, informed choice and signposting as you possibly can. You will only get one chance to help them through this devastating experience, and you have the potential to have a hugely positive impact on them." And I've just got one final voice from a parent to finish on.
Our story is different in that we were one of the lucky ones. Yes, what we went through, it was heartbreakingly tragic, but the support we received all around was second to none. And I'm not talking about the support from our friends and family, as that's different. I'm talking about the doctors, the midwives, the volunteers, the consultants, those people with the biggest hearts who swooped us up, held us tight, and made sure that we didn't fall. I can't thank them enough, because without them, we wouldn't be where we are today in our healing journey. With their dedication to us, their patients, we learnt how to live again. We learnt how to breathe again. We found that there was life after loss, something I just couldn't imagine in those dark days. So thank you, our wonderful NHS family. Keep doing what you're doing, and know that the work you do can make the hugest impact on the lives of people like us.
Okay, that's great, Claire. I think it's so good to hear parents, and to hear their sort of viewpoint. And obviously, after a while, you know, they're kind of reflecting back on their experience. I'm sure that's going to result in a few questions at the end of the session. So anyone who's listening, you can ask questions. We've got a precious 15-minute question envelope at the end of the session. But now I shall move on to Marc Harder, who is the UK lead for the National Bereavement Care Pathway. He is based at SANDS, and his responsibility is to lead and coordinate all aspects of the development of the pathway, initially working with partner agencies and 32 NHS trusts, piloting the programme in England, and now rolling out the pathway across the country after the final evaluation report was published in May of last year. 5 early adopter sites also started in the NHS Scottish boards in March this year, so it's quite busy. And Marc's background is as a project manager in children's services in local authorities, and previously in managing research projects in the private sector. And his drive is to improve outcomes for families through collaborative working. And he lives in Hampshire with his wife and 3 children, and his spare time, not much, is a school governor, park run regular, and is currently halfway towards completion. I have to read this very carefully. Completion of a marathon challenge. He has 8 of the 15 marathons in 15 months he's running in order to raise money for SANDS. Whoa, that's impressive, Marc.
Thanks. It's a busy time for sure. It did make me laugh when I remembered that I'd written that about in his spare time. Thanks, Sue, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the National Bereavement Care Pathway, or to give it its full title, the National Bereavement Care Pathway for Pregnancy and Baby Loss. So as was said earlier, you know, I work for SANDS with Clare, SANDS being the Stillbirth and Neonatal Death charity, was society, charity now. And we've been working very closely with a number of charity partners across the UK over the last 3 years or so to really develop pathways of care for those whose baby has died, for those who've lost a pregnancy. So although SANDS core areas are around stillbirth and neonatal death, as Claire said, we are there for anybody affected by the death of a baby. And of course, there are more than two experiences of loss. So actually, the pathway covers 5 different areas. It's miscarriage, including ectopic and molar pregnancies, termination of pregnancy due to fetal anomaly, top fill, or for medical reasons, stillbirth, neonatal death, and indeed the SUDI deaths, the sudden unexpected death in infancy up to 12 months. And so working with those partners and with our Royal College colleagues as well, and we started to pilot the bereavement care pathway in a number of sites in England towards the end of 2017. Some of you who are watching may be from one of those 11. And then in 2018, a further 21 came on board, so there are 32. And we're up to 66 now, which is around half of the England NHS Hospital Trust, which we're really thrilled about. And of the remaining 60 or so, well over 50 have already formally expressed their interest in the bereavement care pathway. So we know that it is catching on. The evaluation, as you rightly said, Sue, has really recorded the impact that the pathway has had. So why did we do it? Well, actually, and just to clarify something you said at the start, so Baby Loss Awareness Week is in October of every year, and that is a real focus on baby loss. There's a number of different charities that come together, and there's a number of events that are held. There's awareness raising online, there's a debate in Parliament. And really that from Baby Loss Awareness Week was formed the all-party parliamentary group in Westminster. So it was a group of politicians who knew, either through their own experience, family or constituents, that there were really excellent pockets of bereavement care across the country, but that it was perhaps inconsistent. So they asked SANDS to lead on behalf of that group the development of a national bereavement care pathway to improve standards, but also to ensure greater consistency. So regardless of whether there's an early miscarriage or a late stillbirth, the pathways in terms of the care, the standards, the approach, the parent-centered empathetic approach Claire's been talking about would be adopted regardless of the nature of loss. And that would work from team to team, unit to unit, hospital to hospital, and indeed from country to country within the 4 nations of the UK. So we developed the bereavement care pathway, and it's great to be able to highlight it this month, which is SANDS Awareness Month. So this month is specifically about SANDS, the charity. Baby Loss Awareness Week is still taking place every year in October for a week. So as we developed the pathway during 17 and 18, and indeed into 19, and it was at Baby Loss Awareness Week, October 2018, where we developed and we published 9 core bereavement care standards that we feel, and we felt, and we still do, should be adopted by all trusts. And you begin to see these now within the Care Quality Commission's inspection framework for maternity services, and we'd like to see it in other inspection frameworks too. But essentially what we have called for is 9 core standards, minimum standards around pregnancy loss and the death of a baby. The first 3 relate to parents, as you might expect. And I should add that all along we've had a parent advisory group that have helped us to develop all the aspects of the pathways. And later you'll be able to see where you can download the pathways from. And parents inform all of our work, as Claire's already highlighted on a number of occasions this evening. So the 3 standards that specifically relate to parents are about informed choices. So really important that you know, as healthcare professionals, what choices are there for parents, be that around post-mortem consent, for example, be that around some of the options around lactation, as Claire described, or suppression of milk, around the ability to take baby home, for example, after it has died. So it's just making sure that parents are aware of all the choices that are available for them and giving the opportunity to make that choice, or indeed to go back to them perhaps the next day or a day or two later and ask if that is still the case. Photographs is a great example of that. Secondly then, and I'll talk a little bit more about making memories in a moment or two, so let's jump on from that and talk about bereavement rooms. Some of you will work or be familiar with hospitals where there are bereavement suites, and these are separate rooms, often away from the labour ward, where there are crying healthy babies and joyful celebrating families, for mothers and partners and families to be with their baby and on their own, away from those busy wards, to have time and space to make memories, to be in that safe space, potentially to recover from surgery, and to have some really specialized care from a team of midwives, in many cases a specialist bereavement midwife. But we also feel, and hence we've called it bereavement rooms rather than bereavement suites, we also feel that the same should be true in other areas of hospital units as well. So a separate room where a mother and partner can go, after learning of an anomaly perhaps at the initial scan, bad news being broken to them, and time and space just to consider their options outside of and separate to a busy clinic full of waiting patients, etc. So really important that there's a separate space for mothers and families to be. The second set of three, if you like, relate to professionals, to yourselves, and to students. We feel very strongly that there needs to be a bereavement lead in each hospital trust or board. So yes, a specialist bereavement midwife, fantastic, or a lead neonatal nurse specialising in bereavement, fantastic, but actually a lead for the organisation who will oversee the bereavement standards that have been implemented, the development of the bereavement care pathway, training, resources, rooms, opportunity to make memories, etc. Someone who can oversee the delivery of high quality bereavement care standards within any given trust and tie in with chaplaincy or the overarching bereavement services, for example. That's really crucial as a role. Next, that there's bereavement care training. Obviously, this evening helps towards that and is maybe a stepping stone to a whole day training session that SANDS can provide. Although at the moment we're doing those online because clearly there's been an impediment through COVID, of course, that prohibits us from going onto site at the moment and delivering a face-to-face training session for 20 staff or so. But training specific to bereavement care around the death of a baby, really, really vital that we feel. Then that there is support, as Claire has talked about, for you as healthcare professionals, someone and somewhere you can go to share your experiences, to be able to offload a little, to have some peer support, some supervision, and some care for you, so that, as Claire was saying, your cup is fuller, so that you're able to pour that for others. And a reminder here that SANDS is here for you. SANDS is there for anyone affected by the death of a baby, not just families, but staff too. So if you've had a particularly difficult shift, for example, do give the helpline a call, and we'll only be too willing to talk with you. And those resources must be there too. And that could be guidelines, it could be the availability of online resources, or some of the tangible items to help make memories. And so that's 3 for parents, 3 for professionals, and 3 for process, 3 Ps. And so there we believe there should be a bereavement care plan that is parent-led, relating back to informed choices, but there's a plan that enables continuity of care for parents, so they're not moved sort of from one team and one person to the next, having to tell their story over and over again. That things are written down in terms of the choices they've made, and it's very clear that is parent-led. And related to that, there should be a system to signal that there's been a bereavement. Some of you will be familiar with the SANDS teardrop sticker that is put on the mother's notes to denote that there has been a bereavement. And those are well received. And they're just a simple thing like that makes a big difference. Or in Liverpool Women's Hospital, you know, there's a lanyard, for example, that has the honeysuckle suite written on it. And it's just an indicator for those who wish to have one, to staff, that this is one of our families who has suffered a bereavement. And then finally, that there should be assessment and referral for emotional and mental health, as Claire said earlier as well. So there's kind of the initial bereavement care that you can provide in a hospital setting, but then longer term, before they leave that hospital setting, you know, we feel there should be an assessment of needs made around emotional and mental health, particularly for those families for whom, you know, they may not have the support network that others have, and be able to refer on to more specialist support. So those are our 9 standards that we ask trusts and boards to adopt. Now, I mentioned making memories, and some of you will be very familiar with this concept, others perhaps less so. And making memories are really so important. It came through in 2 or 3 of those videos that were shared. You know, that one towards the end with the bereaved dad saying, "Thank you so much for enabling us to have 6 days with Isaac," where we were able to make memories in such a difficult time. Photographs and videos. There are wonderful people who come in and take a free set of photographs, maybe lovely black and white or colour, of course, photo of the parent with their baby and perhaps the family. Or maybe you have a camera that you've been trained to use to take some nice photos. And again, for some, that seems a strange concept. Why would you want to take a photo of a dead baby, frankly, as one of the mums said earlier? But actually, those are so treasured by families for years and years and years. A memory box of items, SANDS can provide those. There's an example of that down below with the teddy bears there, a little keepsake, a bracelet, some information, some leaflets, the certificate of birth, and information around SANDS. And, you know, some will take a lock of hair and put that in their memory box or what have you, various memories of the baby, and then get that out over time and share those. A memory book perhaps relating to that. Music, the opportunity to bath the baby, and the opportunity for families to visit. But above all of these, just draw your attention really to that second one about time, because parents say to us that much as these tangibles are really special things for us to have and to cherish and to keep, just the opportunity to have time and space and room with our baby and with our family at the most difficult of times is as precious a gift you can give us, as the dad said there in the video, as the things themselves that we're describing. So taking time to help families make memories is a wonderful thing that you can do. So that is a very short whistle-stop tour of the bereavement care pathway, or pathways. You can find out lots more about it here on nbcpathway.org.uk. If you go to nbcp.org.uk, you end up at a caravan park in North Wales. So you need to get it right. It is nbcpathway.org.uk. Or if you're in Scotland, you can use nbcpscotland.org.uk. Those are the second and third slides there. We have a number of online learning modules for further learning, which we've developed through the pathway, through the training group that many charities and Royal Colleges have been involved in. And many of you will have an e-learning for health account, and you can go onto that and just click in National Bereavement Care Pathway, and you'll find 2 modules. One is specifically for healthcare professionals, 30 to 40 minutes, quite detailed around the NBCP. But actually, you can tell friends, family, neighbours, teachers, social workers, your MP about the first module, which is only 7 or 8 minutes long, and it's an introduction to bereavement care after the death of a baby. What do we say? Finding the words, as we've been talking about. And then in addition to that, at the top there, we've included a website. If you just go to SANDS, though, you'll see it there, flash up. We've done some specific work around bereavement care during COVID-19, and a number of you will have kindly already filled in a survey that we've been circulating about what a difference COVID has made to the provision of bereavement care. Some of these things, some of these standards, the memory-making possibilities we've been talking about have been naturally affected, the ability to deliver those, by the pandemic, the ability to use a bereavement suite, to have capacity to attend training. There's more information there about the training workshops and webinars that we're able to provide. And if you so wish, you can follow us on SANDS Insights and SANDS UK, as Claire mentioned earlier, and there's our personal ones where you can find out lots about bereavement care and the work that we do during the week, as well as running and swimming activities at the weekend, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marc. That was fantastic. Two very full presentations. For people who are desperately jotting down those websites, just to let you know that on the Facebook page we're sending out the resources. Now this is the Maternity Midwifery Hour resource list, which is now probably about 4 pages worth, and what we've got a whole chunk of things for bereavement and baby loss. So all of those links will be on that resource list for you. So we do have a little time for questions, and I have had a question that's come through from Elisa Terezia, and she has a question for Claire. And she wants to know, are there any resources for midwives who have themselves been through baby loss?
Yeah, so we at SANDS support parents and healthcare professionals, but of course, healthcare professionals are parents too, and could easily have, a baby could have died. So yeah, our helpline is available for anyone, for parents, and especially for healthcare staff who, if you've lost a baby, then it adds an extra layer of emotion. So yeah, if you need support, then definitely contact SANDS. Have a look on our website or use the helpline number that we'll share at the end.
I think it's sometimes, if you're in the profession, you think you maybe ought to be so brave and be able to cope with this sort of thing. So having a resource is really fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I have another question from Ruth Dodds, and this is a question for both of you in turn, with regard to memory making and photographing the baby. How do you navigate this if and when the family is shocked by your suggestions and say no? Do you feel if you feel it's needed, how do you do this without forcing the issue or confrontation at a very sensitive time? That's a very good question, Ruth.
Yeah, so it depends on 2 things. Ideally, the person who's talking about the memory making and taking the photographs has got a relationship with that family. So we wouldn't want someone who's just come onto shift to read the notes and say, okay, I'm going to do memory making, because that family needs to be cared for and gentle. And often parents will say, like that mum said, no, why would I want to take a picture of a baby who's died? But once you've planted the seed, if you give them time and space and then go back, but very gently go back and just let them process it themselves, the way to introduce it is a really helpful sentence to use is other families. So other families whose babies have died have found it really comforting to take pictures because they like to look back and hold memories of the babies. Or other families, like in the past, who'd like to bath their baby. Would you like to do it? So again, that helps them process, think, oh, okay, because they won't know anyone else that it's happened to. But if they hear that it's happened to someone else and that family chose to bath the baby or dress the baby, then it helps them process it. But very slowly, very patiently is the answer.
Okay. Did you want to add anything, Marc?
No, I can't add anything to that other than what Claire has said about other families. But also it's just that principle of parent choice, informed choice. So talking through with the family, but in an informed way. So the more you as professionals can be, empowered with information and resources and knowledge of what you can do in those scenarios, the better obviously it's going to be. But to take the parents' lead and as Claire said, other families, ...
Other families. And it does come with experience. So midwives who've cared for several bereaved families over the career, it will come naturally through experience. But obviously the first time is is quite difficult. So again, ask for support for colleagues. So you might have a bereavement specialist or someone who's done it before. So ask for support.
I think this buddying idea is really good, or having a skilled person letting you do what you're going to do, but there to support you. But certainly, personally, I found that very helpful, because you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, you don't even know how to do a nice photograph initially. And I think sometimes midwives get worried about that if they do it wrong. And in a way, there's no wrong at this sort of time, is there?
And that's what we often say to students as well. So if you can, care for a bereaved family when you're a student, because you've got the mentor with you. As long as your mentor's happy, then you've got some support there, and it kind of helps with your learning.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Now, I've got a question from Yvonne Iris. This is for Marc. Are the pathways going to continue to be updated with the information you're still receiving from the pilot studies in Scotland, or are they set now?
Hi, thanks, Yvonne, for the question. They are pilot sites, they are early adopter sites, so the guidance that they are using is draft at this stage. And during the course of this year, there'll be a concurrent evaluation that runs alongside the project. And I've got a project manager in Scotland who's dealing directly with the leads for each of those 5 boards, and actually takes weekly feedback. So alongside that weekly feedback and the formal evaluation that will take place independently, they will be updated ahead of what we hope to be a national rollout across Scotland later this year, or perhaps early into 2021. Might be slightly more realistic at the moment, but we will see how that goes. And then I imagine we will take the same approach that we have in England, which is that every 3 months the editorial panel gets together. That's the authors of each of those 5 pathways. So the 5 in England are led by Miscarriage Association, ARC, Antenatal Results and Choices, SANDS, Bliss, and the Lullaby Trust for each of those 5 pathways I described. So the leads for each of those meet with me every 3 months. And we go through any feedback that we've received from the ground, from healthcare professionals and from parents, or if there's any new policy or practice that's come in nationally. And we'll go through the pathways and say, okay, which of these do we need to update and to include in the next iteration? So we do that, and then as and when those are available and ready, we then publish those to the website. So the websites are the best place to look for those, and we'll make it clear which version you should be using. So the most recent version in England is I think it's version 6 now, but it's the one that we released and published sort of February, March time that's available. The Scotland ones are only available at the moment through to those 5 early adopter boards. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's it.
It's iterating. We're saying it's not a moment in time. Things change, as COVID has proven. But more generally, things change because practice changes, and we hear different experiences from parents from across those pathways. And so we want to make sure that those the pathway materials and guidance notes reflect that and are updated. Yeah, thank you.
Fabulous. Okay, I think we've got one more question because we're running out of time now. And this is from Mala Majaria. I come from an Indian background and am interested in learning more about cultural needs of Asian parents, I guess in the context of loss. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. We don't have much time, but
what I would say is get in touch, I guess, because we haven't got the time. But yes, we are fully aware that there's various beliefs and cultural needs around religion, about culture, that impact death and birth. So my contact details will be available at the end. So yes, please do get in touch.
I think what I would add to that is don't assume because one person is one culture, they'll follow one route.
Yeah.
We have very complicated cultures ourselves in ourselves. Anyway, we could talk forever, certainly for lots of time this evening. We can't, sadly, but I'd like to say a big thank you to our wonderful speakers who've given us quite a generous snapshot, but have left us hungry for more. So I think we'll be going to that website fairly after this, going to our little resource list. There will be some people on social media, so if anyone has questions, we'll try and answer them as we can. The resources will be available on the website and Facebook on Friday, and this will be released as a podcast out on Friday also, so you can share it with your friends and re-listen to some of the things. Next week, Maternity Midwifery Hour is focused on student midwife voices during the COVID-19 crisis, and we have Alicia Shirley-Burnett and Laura Henry with us. And we've got other hours we'll be looking at issues like changing times and ensuring women's choices. Look out also for the online festivals for the 23rd of June and the 14th of July. Those are all-day events. And in the meantime, thank you for coming. Stay safe and well. Look after yourselves and your loved ones. And see you next Wednesday. All being well. Take care.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.